Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Educator Yarns. This is season 4, episode 11, and this is our final episode for this season. I'm here today with my co-host Belinda from Freshwater Education. Oh, sorry, I cut you off there, Belinda.
Sorry, Des. I tend to do that. I'm always in trouble for that.
Oh, you think we have it down by now, but obviously not. But we're all good. We're all good.
Right
anyway,
at the end.
Today's session, we are talking about outcome 5 of the Early Years Learning Framework. Children are effective communicators. But before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are all gathered on today and pay my respects to the traditional owners and elders, both past and present, and acknowledge any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander listeners that are tuning in for our session today. So welcome everybody and thank you for being here. So I had a quick flick through outcome 5. I've had a bit more than a quick flick, but I was looking at outcome 5.2, so we're just going with that now, right? I'm just dubbing it as that, which is children engage with a range of texts and gain meaning from these texts. And it says that this is evident when children, for example, recognize and engage with written and oral, culturally constructed texts and listen to and discuss stories about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history, culture, ways of sustainability and care, customs and celebrations. That was the first one that sort of really jumped out to me because storytelling and story sharing is such a strong part of our culture and the way that we pass knowledge on from one generation to the next. Are you like, I don't know about you, but like my preferred way to learn is through storytelling and story sharing. What's your preferred way to learn, Belinda?
Yeah, definitely, because I think when I'm presenting workshops and things like that, generally I find that or if I'm even like participating in a workshop, I often can't remember the information they've told me, but if they've told it through the way of a story or a context or a case study that's actually happened, then I can remember what that's about. So absolutely, storytelling is a great tool.
And I think it's also like formally, definitely in workshops, I think it resonates with educators differently, but even informal conversations that you have with people. And like when I go to services or when I go to community and you're sitting down and just having a chat with educators informally and they share their story with you and about their family and how they grew up and what their experiences were. And you just sort of, it just hits you and connects with you in a different way. I think particularly when we're talking about current affairs and issues and parts of our history is that you can sort of sit there and say the dates and give statistics. But if you can talk about your family, and your community and the effects of that. And so people understand that it's not just a random number that you've plucked out of a report, but they can connect those aspects of culture. It humanizes, I guess, is like the thing, right? And I think it's so important. So I think it definitely works. It's important for educators, but equally also important for children. There's a whole heap of Aboriginal history books that are, for children. There's ones like Jundamara, the Kimberley Warrior, Daybreak is Good, by Amy Maguire, Sorry by Anne Kerr, Stories for Simon, by Briggs, Our Home, Our Heartbeat is also good. I don't know, there's just so many. Biddy Garling by Anita Heiss, Kunyi is another one. We have a whole heap, which I'll link in the show notes of this, our, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children's books about history that we recommend, even for things like Anzac Day, right? Like there's Alfred's War that we use, Charlie's Swim, Deadly Soldiers, or Dreaming Soldiers, sorry, I should say. Yeah. They are deadly, but, so there's ones that we use, to teach about other aspects of history as well, which I think are really important. So particularly if you're not confident in your knowledge of Australia's Black history, to have those particular books that you can use to stand behind to support you and what you're saying to children as you're learning alongside them, I think is really important. What are your favourite books that you've used in your home with your children or as an educator, Belinda, that you've fallen back on throughout the years?
Well, I have talked about, I know this is not a text written by Aboriginal authors, but I talk often about the rabbits and my use of the rabbits by John Marsden. I think that's just such a powerful symbol, like visual symbol of the colonization of Australia. I love the Welcome to Country book. I can't think of the author.
Like the hardcover, Annie Joy Murphy.
Yeah. I love that one as well, because it incorporates so many different like things around kinship, around, you know, things like possum skin cloaks, family totems, all things like that. And one of my favorite books, because as you know, I'm mad on STEM, would be Big Rain Coming.
Oh yeah.
Because I love that there's so many elements in there about that intrinsic knowledge that the uncle in the story has about that the rain's coming, and he, you know, because he knows culturally signs and things like that the rain is coming. So I love that story as well.
Yeah, I think the signs
and stuff. Yeah,
the signs and signals, and there are ones like about the seasons, right? So I've been on Darug country the last 2 nights working with services and been talking to them about Jasmine Seymour's book Koori Midiga, which I think is behind me. It talks about the different Darug seasons, and then Ani Manya is one of our presenters in the Koori Curriculum Club this month, doing a masterclass for us, and she's got her children's book Ask Auntie about the seasons, which is another beautifully illustrated children's book, and I think it's been illustrated by Charmaine Lennon Lewis, who I'm a huge fan of. So there's lots of books about the seasons, and like, you know, the first one, which is the non-Indigenous book, but Alison Lester, I think, works quite collaboratively and always has done so with Aboriginal communities, is Only Place a Didgeridoo, right? And looking at the different seasons that way. And I think even if it's not a book about the seasons from the area that you're in, you're still able to use that and compare. So what's happening, you know, in Darug country now, and look at what's happening on your country, and is it the same or is it different? And potentially looking at the Bureau of Meteorology to research what if those local seasons are written down, and you can come up with make your own stories about the seasons. And I mean, other books about sustainability and care. Leanne Myrna is a favorite author of mine. She ran the company Five Little Bears. She's on the Central Coast too. She's at Toronto. And she's got her 5 boys. So she's got Luca and the Coastal Wattle, Louis and the Grass Tree, Oliver and the Eucalypt. I can't remember them all. Frankie and the Banksia. Her niece, I think, is Charlie and the Christmas Bush. So, and then she's got another one called Our Hollow Home. She's got some beautiful books about caring for country and relationships with country, and focusing on a specific plant or tree and looking at the knowledge, you know, the Aboriginal knowledge about that particular plant or tree, I think is really important. So Leanne has some beautiful books that I use to support that.
Yes, I think while we're talking about books, I think it's important that we quickly yarn about how to tell a good resource when it comes to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives in books, for instance, because I know that this is one thing as part of what I do in my consultancy is going out and undertaking cultural safety audits. And part of that is auditing the resources that the service currently already has. And actually, I did this at our school library, and I was quite interested to find a book in our library that was from 1970, and it actually had language. Oh, I wish I had it. I've got it here in my house somewhere. It was like a book from the 1970s, and it referred to Aboriginal people as darkies. And so I think, which is just like, whoa, I kept it, but obviously not to use in the school library, but we've kept it now to use it as a teaching tool for professional development. So, and when we're comparing what is a good resource, what's a culturally appropriate resource and what's not. So when you're looking for books about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, I guess my suggestions would be around, is the author Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, or have they consulted with Aboriginal people, communities, organisations in developing the book? You also want to have a look at the representation of Aboriginal people in the text. So are they accurately described? Are they accurately depicted? Jess, I don't know, like we're around the same age, right? Do you remember that movie Dot and the Koala and Dot and the Kangaroo?
No, I don't.
Oh, no, really? It was like my fave. Shout out to any listeners born in the 80s. But
I was born in the 80s, but I don't remember the thing.
But It's no, I'll send you the link. You've got to have a look at it.
Maybe if I've seen it, maybe I'll remember. No.
I'll send it to you. But in this, it was a very well-known Australian like animation, right? So in the film, Dot like is this little non-Indigenous girl that gets lost in the bush, and then the characters, there's Aboriginal characters in it, but she gets really fearful of the characters because she can hear them doing corroboree. And then when you actually look, because it's also a book, when you actually look at the characters, the Aboriginal characters have no eyes. They've got slits for their eyes, and they don't have a nose, and they just like they look scary. And so that, you know, it's interesting how those kind of images or portrayals can actually actively contribute to bias against Aboriginal people. So
yeah,
I think it's super important that we look at, you know, how are we depicted? Is it accurate? And also, like, can Aboriginal people and children today see themselves represented in the text? So I think it's important that we have a wide range of books that are not just focused on traditional perspectives, but also like focus on contemporary perspectives of what it means to be an Aboriginal person growing up today. So that's why, you know, books like Fair Skinned Blackfellow is a great one. Things that depict like, you know, that we all have a different lived experience today. So I think those are some things to look out for.
Yeah, for sure. We have a free guide, which I'll link in the show notes, which is how to create a holistic First Nations library, which is very similar. A lot of the points that you've mentioned are in there as well. And so, and I think a lot of the books people sometimes are surprised to learn that were developed in the 80s and 90s that they assumed because of their appearance were created and illustrated by Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander people, and then upon investigation have come to realize that they were not. And it's not that you can't, right? So we regularly hold the Koori Curriculum Book Summit, and so we have lots of Aboriginal authors and Torres Strait Islander authors that come and share their story, their book, what the story behind the book, I should say. A lot of those books are made collaboratively with non-Indigenous people, and sometimes we've had some non-Indigenous presenters come and present, Alison Lester being one of them, who works with the Indigenous Literacy Foundation and has a really great collaborative relationship with them. Mark Greenwood is another non-Indigenous person who does that work really ethically, spends a lot of time in community and traveling and basing himself there, listening to the stories, writing it collaboratively. Boomerang and Bat was another one of his. I'm trying to look behind me because I'm so worried. I've got so many books, I forget their names, all the names probably.
I'm quite impressed that you often reach for one and know exactly where it is when you've got so many.
Normally they're just behind me, so they're always here somewhere. But Boomerang and Bat is good. It's about the first Australian Aboriginal cricketing team, and you know the race that they went overseas and they played cricket and so forth, representing Australia, and they did really well, but they still came back to a lot of segregation and racism here in this country. And so sharing that story, that's a really, you know, that's an important one. And he also told the story of Junjamara. So and I know like Ellie Lang works really collaboratively with Adam Goods, you know, and with the writing of their book. So does Carla Rogers supports Annie Munya with the writing of her book. So like that collaboration that you see, these partnerships, and what does that respectful partnership look like? So, you know, doing that investigation, having a look at some of the Koori Curriculum Book Summit recordings. We still have the ones from last year available for educators to have a look at if anyone's interested. But I see a lot of, you know, great collaborations that are emerging now, but you're right, you know, you do need to audit your resources and look at some of those older texts, particularly to look at the wording and make sure that they're appropriate. I have seen they were called out, and I always get worried that I'm going to get sued for like defamation, right? So I have to be very careful what I say. But put it this way, somebody authored and illustrated a series of children's books with a last name that is also a well-known Aboriginal surname, but this particular person was not Aboriginal, but was illustrating and writing a lot of Aboriginal books, and so by all appearances, the books appeared to be written and or illustrated by an Aboriginal person. And some of the illustrations, a lot of people found them frightening, similar to what you're sort of saying with Dot. A lot of them found them frightening and inappropriate, like the Aboriginal characters looked almost alien in appearance and so forth. And so really thinking critically about that, like, and I feel that there's a history of that in literature, but also in television with people of colour, where those characters are made to look, I don't know, subhuman. Subhuman is one way of putting it, or of low intellect is another way of saying it. You know what I mean? Like the role that they play in their appearance is always that of inferior, and there's an issue, you know, with that. So I think having a look and you know, at some of those classics that have been around for a while and thinking critically about it. For example, a lot of people know Peter Pan, the Disney movie, and thinking about how First Nations people are represented in that movie. And you're looking at that now, and, you know, with the knowledge that you have now at the time that was created, we would not depict First
Nations people in that.
Not Aboriginal First Nations people, like from
North
other
America?
Yeah, I think I don't know where exactly they were based, but I'm pretty sure, you know, they were Native Americans, right?
Okay.
So, but I don't know for sure. I think they could have also. I don't know that it was Canada though.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I say First Nations from other countries because I'm not sure, but I think I would assume, you know, American.
Yeah.
But that particular film is one that's come under scrutiny, you know,
right,
a lot.
It's interesting, actually, in my studies, like in my Masters of Indigenous Education, we focused a lot on how that representation of, like, historically, how that was deliberate, that whole perception of having Aboriginal people being presented as the other, you know, othering Aboriginal people, making them look subhuman, making them seem of that lower intellect was a deliberate move in the whole terra nullius situation. So it's so interesting, you know, once you start really educating yourself on this sort of stuff and then having that critical lens and that cultural lens as you're going through this sort of stuff, you can see so deeply into some things that maybe the illustrator didn't even think of when they had done it. But I mean, there's one, oh gosh, now you got me worried about defamation. There's one book which I won't mention, but there is a picture. I'll copy off your little tune there, Jess.
Yeah.
It's a really well-known one too, but there's a picture of a Aboriginal child or an Aboriginal person next to a dinosaur. And if you look at the imagery in the picture, the Aboriginal child is like faded out. So it looks like, and the dinosaur is faded out. Well, what does that suggest to you?
Like extinction.
Yeah.
I know that. I actually know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So, I mean, all of those things that once we apply that, you know, that cultural lens, it just becomes second nature once you kind of, so that free guide, I think, just sounds great.
Yeah. And I think, look, sometimes it's not what you do, it's what you don't do that creates that stereotype, right? So by not showing Aboriginal people that have fairer skin, that are driving cars and living in cities, you're creating a stereotype that all Aboriginal people have dark coloured skin that are living out in the bush. And and there are many ways that we live, there are many ways that we look, there are many places and spaces that we occupy and thrive in, and it's important that that's reflected in the literature that you're providing for children. So it goes on to say in 5.2 that educators promote this learning, for example, when they teach art as language and how artists can use the elements and principles to construct visual, musical, dance and media texts, that they can seek Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander guidance to ensure the authentic voices of traditional owners, elders and community members are highlighted in planning and practice, that they engage in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander-led professional development about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ways of learning, such as the 8 ways and both ways pedagogy. And so, like, once again, I think there's a really strong emphasis here on community engagement and cultural responsiveness for educators and building your cultural capacity through being informed. And I guess I see it happen a lot with the 8 ways of learning. And I think it's, you know, because of the history potentially of the 8 ways of learning, and when it first came about, it wasn't handled great. But I'm really glad that in here, in the EYLF, it's saying that educators should be engaging in professional development, because that's what we deserve, right? That's what our kids deserve, not just to, and I think there's that risk in that saying that something is better than nothing. I don't think that something is better than nothing, because you can do damage by being ill-informed and not really thinking through what you are doing, and representing things poorly and incorrectly and disrespectfully. You know, damage can be done. And so just like if you were unsure about anything, in early childhood, like we have to remember that regardless if we start with a Cert 3, a diploma, or a teaching degree, when you enter into early childhood, what you learn at TAFE and university, that's early childhood 101. That's not everything. The learning happens, the real learning starts when you walk in the classroom and you start doing it. The knowing's in the doing, and it's through critical reflection and role modeling and mentoring from others and ongoing professional development that you grow your pedagogy and practice. Hopefully, you get that strong foundation from your RTOs, but it's an ongoing learning that happens within. And professional development now, I think, has become part of the culture of early childhood. It definitely was not always that way. When I started, it definitely wasn't. But for me, when I started, like, knowing your culture, or like knowing your family's culture, put it that way, because of where, I grew up, in Sydney, not on country, with my family and community and so forth. I think, it became something that I became more interested in the older that I got, and wanted to know more and understand more. And understanding how to put that into early childhood. And again, remembering this is before there was even the original early years learning framework. There was no guide on how to do that. And so, I paid for myself back then to go to the ATSI conference, which was up here at Terrigal, actually. So I came to that a couple of years in a row, and talked with Bob and listened to workshops and stories and so forth. And that, I paid for myself to go and do that professional development. It's something that I needed to know. And similarly, like when I was working in a support role, supporting children that were on the spectrum, like I was a teenager, like I had never met anyone with autism before. I didn't even know what autism was. And here I was, a support worker for a child that was on the spectrum, right? And I didn't feel like I was equipped to do my job. So I went and did training with Aspect to inform myself. So I think when we identify that there's limitations, or that we have an interest or whatever, and we feel that there are shortcomings, hopefully now, our places of employment will support us to go and do that training and grow our professional skills and so forth. But we also have some personal responsibility to continue with that. So whether that's through listening to podcasts, reading online journal articles, going to talks that are online now as well. Sometimes you don't even have to leave your house, you can do it all online. So we also have that responsibility to take steps to grow ourselves professionally in our professional practice. But as it is our last episode of this season, I thought it might be an opportunity, Belinda, if you're wanting to share a little bit about professional development opportunities that you offer at Freshwater Education for early childhood educators that are wanting to engage with Aboriginal-led professional development.
Yeah, let me just bring up my website, Jess. I'm just, I'm just starting out with, Freshwater Education, I think, is like really being helped by being part of this podcast, because it's just growing and growing and growing, which is amazing. I guess what some of the things that we're doing in terms of professional development workshops is I do run a Embedding Aboriginal Perspectives workshop, which talks around things like because I think a lot of things, if you haven't engaged in professional learning about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, histories and cultures, you really need a basis for like what are some of the common values or some common cultural beliefs and practices of our people to understand how to incorporate that, obviously. So the Embedding Aboriginal Perspectives workshop is all about cultural practices, identity, culturally responsive pedagogy, cultural safety, and STEM, as I'm a STEM lover. I also run a cultural responsiveness workshop. So that's really about examining our own practice, our own cultural bias and things like that. And then I also have one about building relationships with Aboriginal families and communities. And I think that's kind of goes on with what we've been talking about with knowing how to consult with and engage and connect with Aboriginal community members. And then on top of that, Jess, I'm obviously also doing mentoring. So services can contact us at Freshwater Education to engage in, online or face-to-face mentoring as well. That's all I can think of off the top of my head. I guess a lot of the stuff that I'm doing is sort of tailored to what the services need as well. So we can cover any kind of content or topic within, you know, within that scope. So yeah, what about you guys? What are you guys offering?
Oh, how long have you got? So I think, like, obviously we do live webinars, we have pre-recorded webinars, and I think live webinars are good for educators that want to be able to interact and ask questions and so forth. But if you just want to sort of sit back and listen at your own leisure and your own pace, the pre-recorded options are there for you, and all very similar topics to what you're doing, Belinda. And we do ones on NAIDOC week and reconciliation week as well. Yeah, building community connections, embedding Aboriginal perspectives. We do a general one, and then we do one specifically on infants, Aboriginal art, Aboriginal storytelling. So those are sort of like our webinar options that we have. Then we also do in-services. So I'm traveling around like a mad person at the moment, from one end of the country to the other. Maternity leave is well and truly over. So we're doing pedagogy workshops, embedding workshops, and similar to you. So before we go out, we sort of jump on a Zoom call or have a chat on the phone. A member of our team will with the service and sort of say, hey, like, what are you after? We customize it to suit their needs, but more than not, often than not, we get there and whatever they've booked us for is sometimes not exactly what they need. So we just sort of go with the flow, because I kind of think the benefit of being is in person is that you can respond to the needs that you see, and have some yarns and not necessarily just do death by PowerPoint sort of stuff. We're also going back to doing public events and workshops. So we've got one coming up in Canberra, handful in Queensland. We're planning one in Sydney in around October, and another one in Victoria, which will be happening in November this year. So you can find details about our public events and workshops on our website. And then we have our membership. So the Koori Curriculum Club. So we have wonderful presenters like yourself, Belinda, that are on there that talk about a range of different topics. So you get access to all of my pre-recorded webinars, lesson plans, fact sheets, and monthly we have different masterclass presenters come and join us who talk about their business, their consultancy, what they do, their area, their specific area of interest, from anything from bush tucker to anti-bias to STEM to pedagogy to connecting with families and communities. And that seems to be where most people end up these days. They do a little bit with us and then they jump all over into the membership and start listening to the multiple voices, which is cool too. So I think, and then I know that you and I have talked about where to next after this podcast. And so for all your listeners,
so fun. Yeah,
you got to watch this space, because like whilst this is the final episode of season 4, I hope it's definitely not the end of the collaboration that Belinda and I will have together. And we've talked about making a couple of courses together potentially, and you know, thinking about where this collaboration will take us next. So it's because it's been too much fun. But yeah, if you're thinking about professional development, and I think definitely with all the changes that we've seen with the early years learning framework, I know that a lot of educators are most definitely needing it. And I hope that, you know, they're able to access funding, you know, Start Strong funding, Kindy Uplift funding, Innovative Solutions funding, club grants, etc., to be able to support them in getting that, because there's a lot, you know, as I, you know, we try our best to sort of help in these podcast episodes, but we struggle to get through it, don't we, each episode, and give all the advice that we can. But all right, so we've got back to outcome 5, children express ideas and make meaning using a range of media. So they say here to share the stories and symbols of their own culture and reenact well-known stories, and enjoy engaging with and sharing a wide variety of cultural texts, including those authored by traditional owners. And so I guess like this is the one type of book that I believe that only Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people should write, is like our creation stories or our dreaming stories.
Yeah.
I really don't feel like it's the business of a non-Indigenous person, regardless if it's a collaboration, to be telling those stories. And so that's where I think the traditional owners really do come in, to share the stories of place where people are situated and learning on. And also potentially, I don't know in early childhood, but definitely in primary, when you're starting to approach more sensitive topics. I feel like it's always good to do that with community engagement, collaboration and support, and not just have non-Indigenous teachers telling Aboriginal children about the trauma from their families and communities' history. So I think traditional owners do have a key role to play there, that people should be consulting and considering how they can work collaboratively with that.
And I guess, like, if we're talking about the concept of traditional owners, just so people are aware, when we're talking about traditional owners that are capitalised like that, we're talking about native title holders. So is that how you interpret that, Jess?
Yeah, I think it's tricky, particularly where we are on the Central Coast. There's a lot of areas where there's that conflict. And like, to be honest, like, and I don't even know that we're on dark and young country, put it that way, like, really, like, depending on who you talk to. And so I think you have to, I don't know. I think there are bloodline traditional owners of this area, and I think that's important to recognize them, and that family in this area are the Howies. So
Oh,
do you know what I mean? I think it's like
just opened a can of worms.
It's opening a can of worms. Do you know what I mean? But if I'm to answer it honestly, I think that it's tricky, and it's not as simple as just going down to your local Aboriginal Lands Council, because the people that work at your local Aboriginal Lands Council are not necessarily the traditional owners of this place, of where we are. And whilst their organisation has an important role to play, and this is the thing I think educators have to understand, it's not a one-stop shop, right, with connecting with community. And sometimes it's about, you really have to do that groundwork of developing a stakeholders list, knowing who is who, and and that takes time,
Yeah.
And then as you go down that path, you are going to come against people that say, don't work with them, only work with these, we don't talk to them. And you can get yourself in that position where it's like, well, what do I do? Because if I talk with them, then I'm upsetting those people, and it looks like I'm taking sides and whatever. But I think as an early learning service, the line that I have always taken is that we provide community care, and therefore we need to have respectful relationships and partnerships with everybody that's in our community, because everybody needs to feel included and welcomed within our service. For me, as a consultant, I always take people how I find them, because I hear a lot. And I think a lot of people that work within the Aboriginal education space or Aboriginal community space in general, we hear a lot about other people and who they are and what they are and whatever. But I think for me, I just think, you believe nothing of what do they say? Believe nothing of what you hear and only half of what you see, right? So whilst I can respect people's experiences and points of view, I like to take people how I find them and make my own assessment.
100%. Me too.
And
you're missing so many valuable opportunities if you don't, if you're going on, because there's lots of, within our communities, as you know, Jess, like, there's lots of there's some amazing things happening, but there's also, like, a lot of tension, and there's also like family feuding and things like that happen as well. So even children are brought into that in some context. So it's something to be aware of. But certainly I think I agree with what you're saying. Take what's said with a grain of salt and make your own opinions.
That's right. Like, I'll talk and work with anyone and make my own assessment of their character, and that's how I would hope people would treat me, is that you have a yarn and you make your own assessment and so forth. So I don't know, that's why I think, I know that's probably that's not we've gone on our own tangent here, but I think it's something that educators come up against a lot, is that they say to me, we get conflicting advice. We talk to one person, they say one thing, we talk to somebody else, they say another thing, or we don't know who's who, and blah, blah, blah. And this one says, don't work with that one, don't talk with that one. And I think you just have to be strong in your approach. And just my line is always that we run an early learning service, and we provide community care, and therefore we're required to work with everybody that's within our community so that everybody feels welcome, right? And and you can't take sides in that. Anyway,
nor is that our place to, is it? As no, we've been having quite confronting conversations at our school in regards to land boundaries and traditional ownership, things like that. And it's caused lots and lots of upsets in many different ways with many different people. And I think, at the end of the day, I've sort of put forward that like as my role as a teacher at the school, even though I'm the Aboriginal teacher at the school, I don't believe that it is my place to be able to make decisions that are affecting a whole community. That there's things that, that are our place, and that's not my place. It's not even my country, so I really have no say on it. So,
And this is it. That's exactly
yeah.
how I feel with here. Do you know what I mean? Like, I live on the Central Coast. My grandparents lived on the Central Coast. Like, so we've been here for a while, but like this is not like where we're from, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a Wiradjuri. It's not my place. It's not my family's place. We're visitors here. So, and I think that's me as well, being really careful of the line that I have to walk, and like what my role is, and where people come to me and they want to know about language or protocols or the dreaming or the history of this place. That's not my role, and that's something that, I think as like any Aboriginal person that's providing a service in this space, we're all very aware of what our space is that we can hold, and where we need to work collaboratively with others,
Just on that note, in terms of the, one of the dot points and outcome 5.2, I think it was point 2, which was the critically reflect on how they are embedding. This is educators critically reflect on how they are embedding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives and voices into every part of their planning and their setting. Do you have like a particular way that you recommend that educators like reflect or write down or capture how they are incorporating Aboriginal perspectives?
I mean, like, we use a RAP. So a RAP, a reconciliation action plan, tells you what, like, it outlines in the classroom, around the service, and in the community. So you can mark things off. But then the way that I capture what we have achieved, essentially we just use a PowerPoint. So each RAP action is its own slide with, however many slides you need to continue to add, right? So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the classroom, and I will capture what we have done as we move through our deliverables in that way in a PowerPoint. And normally it sits in a shared drive, so all educators can contribute to it. In terms of, so that's how I plan to holistically do it in the classroom, around the service, and with the community, is I really lean into reconciliation action plans. The critical reflection piece, I mean, you have your reflection survey, which you do incrementally, which is part of Narragansett, and that process of setting up. But also having mentors, consultants and mentors come in, or community members come in, where you can talk about your RAP and actions of your RAP, and they can provoke you, and this is a thing for me. And sometimes, I mean, you have to, we all do things a little bit differently. I'm not prescriptive in when people ask me a question. I don't prescribe the answer to them directly. I talk to them about processes that guide them towards finding the answer themselves. Because if I give you the answer, you're always going to be asking. You're never going to be knowing. So we need to prompt and guide and provoke that critical discussion. I provide readings. I show case studies, etc., that introduces different ways of knowing and being and doing, so to broaden people's worldview and to broaden their knowledge of pedagogy and practice. And hopefully that helps with that critical reflection piece. This particularly comes up a lot when we look at things like the 26th of January. There's a lot of critical reflection discussions that I'm very competent now in facilitating amongst teams who may have divided points of view with something. But I think as well, to know if you are embedding something properly, perspectives properly, without that community consultation or the consultation and mentorship of an Aboriginal consultant like yourself or I, whose perspective are you embedding? You're embedding your perspective of an Aboriginal perspective. And if you're not Aboriginal, then it's not an Aboriginal perspective. You know what I mean? Like, so to understand if you've done it right, you need to ascertain the perspective
from someone.
You need to have relationships with community to know what their perspectives are. Otherwise, how do you know what you're embedding? What does community want you to be doing? And, and being able to have that assessed, like policies, we talked about this in our last episode, to look at your policies and to get feedback from Aboriginal families and communities to know that, yes, these are inclusive, or no, they are not. This is problematic. you know, in some formal way. What about yourself? What do you do?
Well, I think certainly my audit process is the beginning steps of that, where I come in and provide that feedback about enrollment forms, about policies, about the resources. And then, as you know, like, I'm really passionate about that culturally responsive pedagogy and making sure that educators are incorporating the unique perspectives of Aboriginal children at the service, according to what country they come from. But I mean, I've seen, and we yarned about this last time, Jess, but like, I have seen when people are documenting, actually, I'm writing a book, but like, I'm not going to say like how long. It's probably going to take me forever to write. But I am writing like a practical book around cultural safety, and it's going to have like lots of space for, like, it's going to be like I want it to be a best practice guide, like a handbook where educators can write notes about different things, about what they're around cultural safety, and part of it is about embedding Aboriginal perspectives. But I guess what I have seen happen is when services are using different platforms, writing down their programming or whatnot, they're just chucking in like a 8-way symbol and things like that. And that's the Aboriginal perspective that they're recording. So I just was wondering if you had any particular resources or templates that you recommended, apart from the RAP, for that way that people can reflect on and record what they are doing in Aboriginal perspectives.
So we have a programming and planning guide, it's a digital thing. So it's $15. You can get it via our website. And in that, we use a curriculum wall and our brainstorming template, which is what I use when I go out to services and I sit down with them and they tell me this is an interest or topic of inquiry, and this is how I help program collaboratively with them. Yeah. People will use that alongside, hopefully, after they've attended one of our programming, planning and pedagogy sessions. That's what I sort of say. It's like you can have the tools and the templates, but you need to have the proper training and understanding as to how to use them. We also have a resource audit that's a part of that guide that people get access to, as well as how to create a community connections list and how to make your reconciliation commitment statement. So there's a lot of tools within that are further explained in the programming, planning and pedagogy sessions that we run, which is like it's a 4-hour session. Usually we do it over 4 weeks, 1 hour each week, and then educators do homework in between. That's mainly what I do, and it's a train the trainer sort of course. We get a lot of educational leaders coming and doing it, and Aboriginal educators that are then wanting to roll it out with their teams using those templates, which I'm happy for them to be doing. And part of that, obviously, I take educators through the 8 ways of learning and give that understanding to them of how it is intended to be used, and not just as a, like, here's our collage trolley, let's put the non-verbal symbol there, So hopefully it's the theory and the practice that has to go together with those tools.
Sounds interesting. Cool.
Yeah. We are at the end of our time for this episode. It goes so quick every time. And I and it's been so much fun having you as the co-host, Belinda. And I think I've learned a lot, and it's just been enjoyable to have these conversations with someone, because I know that quite often doing this sort of consultancy gig, it can be quite isolating. You don't have that person to talk to all the time, to bounce ideas off, that also gets it, that's doing the same stuff as you, that's out there, that has the same passion and stuff. So I've really loved it. I've totally loved it.
Me too, sis. And my partner's just sick of me talking Aboriginal education, even though he's also Aboriginal. But, so I think it's great to have, it's really racking my brain a bit too, which is great, and always extending on like new ideas and different things like that. So it's been great to have that opportunity to collaborate and just get to know each other and have a yarn.
Yeah, for sure. And as I've said to the listeners, it's not the end. We'll watch this space, because I'm sure that we'll be collaborating and doing some other partnership things in the future, because we've just had too much fun doing this. So thanks everybody for listening, and for those that have taken the time to send in questions and leave reviews and give us some feedback. We've really appreciated it. I hope that you've gotten some ideas on how to extend your reconciliation action plans, and insight on how to work with the new early years learning framework and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander principle that's been included. We would love to see examples of your practice as they grow and develop. So please tag Freshwater Education and Koori curriculum in those posts so we can see what you're doing. Reach out if you'd like to work with us and know more about the services that we provide. And until next time, take care.
Stay deadly, everyone.